So for today's topic of discussion, I don't want to have a whole lot of preliminaries because I just really want to get into it. So let's go. But today's topic of discussion is titled No Weapon, right? Maybe if you're a child of the 90s, you remember Fred Hammond murdered a very popular song titled No Weapon. And if you know anything about the song, it comes from a verse in Isaiah that talks about no weapon formed against us shall prosper. Now, you know, there are many forms of weapon, that are formed against us. Now, a weapon can be basically seen as anything that can be used to cause harm. So weapons can be physical, weapons can be mental, weapons can be verbal. Sometimes weapons can be deceitful. Sometimes weapons can be seen. Sometimes we don't see it. But what Isaiah is giving us this idea is no matter what form a weapon may start the process against you, ultimately it won't work. Several years ago, I was an account sales manager in the soda industry with a company. This particular company, this branch, was going through a lot of turnover. I mean, it was nothing. We had new regional district managers all the time, operation manager, new salesmen, new truck drivers, merchant, whatever you name it. We went through a lot of them. And ultimately, we didn't know that the company was up for sale. So, when they're going through these transitions and they're trying to unload assets like us, they'll basically let these jobs downsize until all they basically have is a product line. So anyway, as they're, doing whatever they had to do just to keep the company afloat, sometimes they would put people in position that you would look at them and say, man, these folks aren't going to last long. But anyway, there was this guy that was hired basically as an account sales manager. You kind of had a territory that you sold sodas in, and mine was 5 counties. It was a gigantic territory, but we were a small company, so we had to do what we had to do to stay afloat. And anyway, they hired a district manager above me, and one night, this company that I'm worked for that shall remain nameless was having a rollout for a new product. Now, this product line was like a 10-calorie drink, soda line. So it was supposed to compete with Coke Zero and Diet Coke and these sorts of things, but remain with the original flavor. Because, sometimes these diet drinks don't taste the same, right? So we are headed out to a bigger city to do this rollout and get all this new products and whatever. We're doing samples and just marketing placements and all this stuff. So we come to a 4-way, and my new district manager is a white guy. And at this 4-way, it's based on right-of-way. There was a black individual across from us who had the right-of-way. So rightfully, it was their place to go first. But just randomly, in this transaction between these vehicles, my district manager says something that sits unsettled in my spirit even now, about 8 years later. But he says, well, I'm a white guy, so that means I get to go first. And he takes off through the 4-way and cuts this other vehicle off. He's like, happens every day. Now, just keep in mind, in this car, it was just me and him. And to hear this kind of statement, because he was, a white man, he felt like he had a certain level of privilege and priority over this black person who was rightfully, lawfully the recipient that should have went first because they had the right of way. These are simple driving laws that are not bent by color, creed, gender or anything. And we begin to have a heated discussion, and he thought I had, very thin skin, and that I shouldn't have allowed that to bother me because he was just cracking a joke. But in reality, some jokes are really not in place because anyway, it goes without saying that you have to be very tasteful in your thought process, because what may fly in your circle of jokes, once you use it in the real world, that with people that this might affect, you may have problems. But so as the story would later go on, there was a lot of animosity that would develop between me and this individual. But I never allowed myself to get out of character, because ultimately at the end of the day, my purpose for working was because I've got a family to take care of. So I wasn't going to do or say anything that was going to put my family in danger, but I also was going to let my attitude reflect this idea that I had drawn a line in the sand. And until he really apologized, until he owned up to what he'd done, I mean, he was a weapon. So, this guy done a lot of underhanded things from that point on, basically to try to cover what he did. He wanted to get me fired. But at the end of the day, it just backfired on him. It did not work. It did not work. God set it up where, he ultimately didn't get anything he wanted, and he realized he was in a losing situation. Now, I didn't never go to HR. I never told any of my coworkers, but I remember I got a phone call one Monday morning. It was early in the morning. And it was his number. And when I seen the call early on a Monday morning, I'm like, Satan, please don't disturb my peace. But the call was to let me know that, hey, listen, I know you don't have anything for me, and I understand it, but I'm just taking my family, going elsewhere, and that was the end of that. So I said that to say sometimes people will do crazy things, and instead of owning up, they will allow themselves to be used by Satan in such a way that they become weapons. But for you, always keep in mind what you have at stake. At every table of negotiation, all of our interactions with people, these are negotiations. If you're sitting across from somebody in some kind of sphere that may not feel like they're with you, always remember what the stakes are. Sometimes you can settle, sometimes you can cooperate, or sometimes you can insist to hold your ground and not fold under pressure. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to tell you guys that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Any words that people speak about you behind your back will not work. Y'all be blessed.